So once upon a time is a good way to begin a story, isn't it? Once upon a time, there was a rabbi who lived in a small village in Russia, and every Friday morning, this rabbi would disappear for hours. And those who faithfully followed him would always say, "Our rabbi disappears for hours every Friday because he ascends to the heavens to talk with God." Well, a newcomer came to the village, and he decided he was going to find out where this rabbi actually went. And so he waited outside the rabbi's house early on a Friday morning. He watched as the rabbi got up, got dressed in peasant clothing, ate his breakfast, said his prayers, and left the house. He followed the rabbi as the rabbi picked up his axe and headed out into the woods, chopped down a tree. And then he followed the rabbi as he bundled up the wood and carried it to a house in the poorest section of the village. He stood outside and looked through the windows of this house, and he saw the rabbi greeting an old woman and her sick son. He watched as the rabbi put some of the wood into the fireplace, made a fire, prepared soup, fed the old woman and her sick son, and then left the rest of the wood, enough wood to care for them for the week. And then he watched as the rabbi quietly made his way back to the house. The newcomer eventually became a disciple of the rabbi himself, and he would listen quietly as all the other followers talked about how their rabbi ascended to the heavens every Friday morning. Didn't say much. And eventually, when they would say that, he would simply say, "Oh no, he goes much higher than that." A story. A story meant to teach us about who we are and who we're meant to be. A story that teaches us that when we seek a real connection with God, we also find ourselves living with great care toward others. Jesus was a storytelling rabbi too. He told a lot of stories, all of them following in that same great moral tradition of love for God and love for neighbor. One of the stories that we probably remember very well was the day that Jesus was in the synagogue teaching, which means arguing, with the other religious leaders. And they were arguing, and one of the religious leaders, a Pharisee who was also a lawyer, decided that he had the perfect question to challenge and trick Jesus. He asked him to name the greatest commandment. Now, this was, of course, incredibly challenging because there were 613 commandments. 248 of those commandments were positive commandments, things that the people were told to do, to follow the rules and honor and love God. 248 commandments corresponding to the 248 parts of the body. There were 365 negative commandments, the thou shalt nots, if you want to honor and love God. 365 negative commandments for each day of the year. The rabbis were very consistent in setting up a system of rules that let people know if you want to honor God, it has to be with your whole body every day of the year. The common view at the time was that every single law was equal, and if you held one above another, it was the height of human hubris. You were not loving God in the way that you should. And so it was a trap for sure. Except that Jesus responded with words that every faithful Jew knew very well, words that we know well as well. These words were so intimate, so important, that they were carried in a box on the forehead of every faithful Jew, in a little box called a phylactery. And they were placed on a doorpost in a box called a mezuzah. You might find a mezuzah on the homes of faithful Jews even now. And those words were from Deuteronomy 6, the great Shema. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. And then Jesus added, and another is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. For Jesus, It was simple. Our love for God, our devotion to God, finds its highest expression in our love, devotion, and care for others. For Jesus, it was simple. But it seems that lately we Christians aren't always so certain that that's what we're meant to do. Now, I'm not big on social media, but every now and then I'll go out there to check out some posts to see what's happening in our culture. And these are a few posts that I have seen recently from Christians. We need to take our country back for God, even if it means using force. The Bible supports our right to deny health care to those who don't share our beliefs. Immigrants are a threat to our Christian values and must be stopped. And perhaps most baffling of all, because Jesus said, when you feed the poor, you're literally feeding me, supporting the wealthy is a divine mandate. The poor should work harder. For those of us who understand Jesus as the incarnation of God's love and mercy and kindness and grace, these ideas are disturbing, confounding, forcing people to profess a faith they don't have, letting people be harmed, injured, perhaps die because they don't have health care, discriminating against the lost, the least, and the lonely, an overall disregard for human well-being. None of it sounds like the God of Jesus to me. So I've been searching for answers, searching for some way to understand rather than simply judge and critique. So some people say the key to understanding the differences among Christians has something to do with whether we emphasize a vertical or horizontal moral framework. So a vertical morality, or a sense of a vertical moral framework, this is according to T. Levings, who has written a book about this, teaches that authority and power and a moral code of right and wrong or acceptable and unacceptable come from above, come from an exterior superior who designates rules and orders and systems to follow, and they must be obeyed by those of us beneath. So when we're talking about a vertical morality, we're talking about those relationships that point us upward, beyond ourselves, towards something that is transcendent, eternal, and larger than us. It could mean that we find ourselves connected to a cause, an ideal, a nation, a leader, or a religion or God. People who lean heavily on this vertical approach to morality define righteousness by obedience to that great superior reality, to the one who is in charge, not necessarily by impact to others. So in the context of religion, the superior that we follow is God. But in politics, it could be an authoritarian dictator. In a cult, it could be the controlling leader. Whatever the circumstances, the idea is that right or wrong is based on following the command of the one who is in charge, the one who holds ultimate authority and power. But vertical morality, of course, is not the only framework, not even in religion. So what's horizontal morality? Horizontal morality prioritizes the well-being of others. It prioritizes our personal relationships, our communities, our neighbors. In horizontal morality, empathy and compassion are the highest values. And we determine whether something is good or bad based on its impact on other people. Righteousness is defined by minimizing harm and maximizing good for everyone, whether they hold our beliefs or not. Now, the difference between these frameworks is just the motivation. It's not that vertical morality necessarily leads to harm toward others, and horizontal morality always leads to good. One person might help and support a neighbor because they believe God asks them to. Another person might help and support a neighbor because they want what's best for that neighbor. Both might result in the same thing, but the motivation is different. Now, I think this helps. It helps us understand some of the differences among Christians. Because the truth is that we have a lean, don't we? Some Christians lean upward toward their devotion to God and the practices that make them feel deeply connected to God. And sometimes we can lean so hard in that direction that we become dogmatic, even a little bit authoritarian in asserting that everyone must conform to our understanding of what God is asking, what is pleasing to God. Some of us lean wide out toward other people, and we have such a desire to please and care for others, we have a hard time saying no. And sometimes we can lean so wide, so far toward others that transcendent dimension, our devotion to God, seems almost lost. Neither is the fullness of the gospel, is it? Now, I think it helps. I think it helps explain some of what's going on, but nothing, honestly, to me, condones or explains fully cruelty in the name of Jesus. We are called to follow Jesus, who put the vertical dimension of morality and the horizontal dimension in perfect balance in everything that he said, in everything that he did, and perfectly upon the cross, where the heart of God is fully displayed, withholding nothing, offering nothing but compassion and grace and forgiveness. Our lives are meant to mirror that. So maybe these differences that we see don't have so much to do with whether we lean toward love for God or love for neighbor, but more about whether we emphasize fear or grace. So another story. This one is also can be found on social media. There's also great stuff in social media, right? So this story is about a Buddhist teacher who gathers his disciples together and he says, okay, here's the scenario. You're holding a cup of coffee and someone walks by and bumps you and you spill the coffee. Why did you spill the coffee? All right? That's the scenario, folks. You're holding a cup of coffee, someone bumps you and you spill the coffee. So why did you spill the coffee? You got bumped, right? You got bumped. That must be the reason. Every disciple said the same thing. You got bumped. We got bumped. No, said the Buddhist teacher. You spilled coffee because you were carrying coffee. If you were carrying water, you would have spilled water. The moral of this story is this. When life shakes us, whatever we carry spills out. What do we carry? What do we carry into this world? Because there is no way that life isn't going to shake us, right? That's not anything we can control. We know the world is shaking. It has been shaking for decades. I mean, we have been living through the biggest technological, economic shift in human history. We have been witnessing it. Every aspect of our lives, from the minute we wake up in the morning until we go to bed at night, has changed. And it's going to continue to change with the AI revolution that's coming. We are in the midst of incredible change. We see environmental decay and natural disasters that are bigger and more destructive than ever before. Change is everywhere. And all the old stories about who we are and who we're supposed to be have come under review. And for some people, that creates such fear and anxiety and a desperation to try to stop the shaking by any and all means. We're so full of fear and anxiety that it spills out. I think that's what we hear in some of these religious pronouncements that sound so harsh and cruel. We hear the fear and anxiety and desperation of our human hearts when the world is shaking, and all we know how to do is spill out that fear. But we have the voice of God to listen to, and we need to be steeped in that voice in order to spill out grace. So let's listen again to the voice of God, a voice that goes all the way back to the people of Israel living in exile in Babylon. They knew something about shaking. They had already experienced a war that had destroyed their homes, had destroyed Jerusalem, had destroyed the temple. They were living in a foreign country under foreign authority. They didn't have their traditions. They didn't have their synagogue. They had nothing. And they were terrified that all of that was the result of God's wrath, that they had done something wrong, and this was God's judgment upon their lives. And they were afraid that more wrath was coming. They were spilling out anxiety and fear and desperation. And Isaiah spills forth grace. He says, "For a brief moment I abandoned you, but with great compassion I will gather you. In overflowing wrath, for a moment I hid my face from you." That's God's definition of God's wrath. Not destruction, not pain and hardship, but a sense of abandonment for a moment. "But with everlasting love I will have compassion on you," said the Lord. And then God even tells those people, so desperate with anxiety and fear, what to do about those other people who don't seem to be returning to God. He says, let them. Let them live their lives and let them return to me, so that God can offer then that wrath, that condemnation, that judgment? No. Let them return so that I, the Lord, can have mercy and pardon them. That's the higher way of God. It's a higher way of perfect love and perfect grace, and it takes time. But it's a perfect love that can cast out our fear and our anxiety. But we have to be full of it. We could stop there. We have to be full of it every day so that it spills out. So, I think that our siblings in Christ who may lean a little more toward that vertical framework, they are right when they say that those of us who focus so much on love and care for others, that we've missed that transcendent reality. I think they're right. Sometimes we're better at feeding hungry bodies than we are at feeding hungry souls. And sometimes we're better at caring for our neighbors than we are about talking about the love of God that compels us to that care. It's easier to do than it is to talk, but that's not the fullness of our faith, and it's not what we need to stay grounded in God and full of God in this world that is constantly shaking. It's devotion to God and devotion to others, but it's God first, because God is foundation. God is the source of our love and our lives, and if we're not centered in that love and grace, no, we're not going to get it right. There's more love and grace coming, even when we get it wrong. But we're not going to get it right without that grace. It's not God at the margins. It's not God on the weekends. It's not God just on Sunday for an hour. It's God at the center of our being, at the center of our lives. And we do not need to be afraid or ashamed to say that our generous love for all people comes from our real connection to a generous, loving, biblical God. God is compassion and grace and forgiveness and mercy, and it's for all of us. So let it fill you so that when the world shakes, it spills out.